Hey everyone, so today we are going to begin painting the top of our cupcake in watercolor. So the first thing you're going to want to do is follow the steps in this video to draw a cupcake. Start with the cake, make a little round top, then create the liner of the cupcake by reversing that curve. Bring your lines in just slightly and you'll see another parallel curve at the bottom and close the liner behind your little cake. Don't put any detail in the liner. We're going to leave that blank for now. Then it's time to figure out what you want your frosting to look like. Go ahead and look online if you want for some frosting inspiration. I'm keeping it pretty simple for this demo, but you can see that I did experiment with shape as I'm going. One of the goals of this project is to explore and experiment. So you want to try out different styles of frosting shape, different colors, different styles of painting as you apply techniques. So it's okay if you need to erase. You should be working on your small watercolor pad and hopefully the paper holds up. If you need to erase quite a bit, do it gently. So you can see I'm trying out different styles of frosting. Again, trying to keep it simple for the sake of the demo. But again, I am looking to refine it as I go. Okay. And then once you have your cupcake drawn, put in a table behind it. And then you'll want to make sure you are set up with your brushes, your paint, and remember to mix directly into the palette. Here I am deciding what kind of cake I want. And I'm thinking I'm going to have a chocolate cake, but when you're doing dark colors, you don't want to just do a flat brown. So mixing in some purples, some blues into a chocolate cake, just like you might mix in a little bit of orange into your yellow or even a little bit of green into a yellow cake. So being aware that colors layer and mix together to create shadows and areas of light. Light has all the colors in it, remember. So don't just assume a shadow is black. Look at it, see that it has blue and purple and brown within it. And you can see here I'm using a wet on wet technique to blend and layer this paint together. I'm keeping it fairly wet, but trying to control that water. You don't want it bleeding outside the lines too much. It will happen from time to time. Now I'm putting in some white circles. I'm going to try to keep these white, almost like there's confetti sprinkles on the cupcake. And I'm grabbing my paint. I've decided that I want to do kind of a monotone frosting, so I'm going to do it in the families of reds, orange, and yellows. And I'm putting down my first layer of red paint. Now if you look, my paint is going to bleed into the cupcake because there's too much water, it's too wet. If your paint bleeds, let it dry and then later you can go back and neaten it up once it's dry. And I'm painting around those little white dots, and this is something I'm experimenting with. Will it work? You'll find out, but it's good to try different ideas out. Often leaving the paper white when you're doing watercolor creates a nice highlight effect too. Sometimes it's not about what you paint, but what you don't paint. You can see that bleeding effect there, and I'm going and trying to control it. I should have really just let it dry and then fixed it afterwards. But so already my patience is being tried a little bit. And so you want to slow down, let things dry, give yourself that time. That's the one thing that you might find frustrating at first working with watercolor, is not being able to control it and then needing to wait for it to dry so that you can go back and neaten it up where necessary. So now I'm going to work on my second layer of frosting. And that layer is going to turn from red to orange. So I'm putting down my lightest layer first. When layering washes, start light and build to dark. And so I'm putting that flat wash in and then layering in some reddish orange over it. And then I'm adding in some yellow, and it's getting fairly wet, and I'm able to kind of smooth it out and blend it around. Okay, so that wet on wet blending. And as I'm waiting for it to dry, now it's time to go in and maybe fix that bottom layer where the chocolate cake is. I'm going to work into the other red frosting so I can refine other layers as I'm going while I wait for other areas to dry. So building up my shading. And now I'm putting in my next layer of yellow. So I've gone from red to orange to yellow. You do not need to follow the colors I choose. You may do your cupcake in any color you want or combination of colors. So now I'm going to go in and put a shadow under the frosting to try and neaten up where that bleed happened. You can see I've switched brushes, so really thinking about which brush will work for what area of painting. Okay. And as you're painting, thinking about line work, hard lines, blended lines, how can you add in lines to bring strength and boldness to the piece to define an area? You can see I'm working purple into that brown to strengthen that shadow. And you can see I'm deciding to blend it away just a little bit. And then some more, and I'm just blending it with a wet brush with no added paint on it. Working back into it with water, taking a bigger brush and smoothing it out. So I'm working back and forth, revising and refining. And that's part of the experimentation, is really like going back over your work, seeing what's going to happen. Is it going to make it look better? Again, with watercolor, it can be hard to control, and you have to kind of work it out as you go. Now I'm going to see what it would happen if I fill in those white areas. And that what ended up happening is I did not like it. It looked dirty, and so then I had to solve that problem. So again, experiment gone wrong, cover it up here. I had to come up with a new plan for how I would paint the frosting to make it look interesting. You don't just want 3 tiers of flat paint. That would be really boring. So I'm cleaning it up, but of course then it bleeds back into what I just refined. Oh, the frustration, you guys. It always happens. So now I'm thinking, how can I refine this? How can I save this painting? This is a very far from perfect painting at this point. So now I'm letting that dry, and I'm saying, okay, what else can I do to make it interesting? I try to add on some dots. I don't love it. So then I start playing with texture. Take some water, start spreading those dots, and it starts to become more interesting. So this is where, when we're painting, we really need to be open-minded to technique, to trying things out, seeing what happens, and blending more to create the texture that I like, so it feels like it's part of the frosting and not just on top of the painting. And while I let that dry, I'm refining that shadow that I keep having trouble with. So working back and forth between different areas is key. And coming back up, working some more on that texture, adding in more yellow. Okay. So and then I'm pulling line work down here on the cake. So I'm working between the top and the bottom. And now this is dry brush so that the paint had dried, and I'm pulling with a dry brush some line work across the cake to give texture to the cake. Okay. Finishing up the texture on the frosting there. And now what I'm doing here is I decided I needed a stronger shadow on the left side, so I'm color blocking. I'm putting in darker color on one side to create a graphic sense of shading. So this is a more graphic style with the color blocking, but it's going to lend more dimension to my work. And I'm going to do it on each layer so that this side of my cupcake has a strong shadow along it. The first layer I added a reddish purple. Now I'm doing a reddish orange on the second layer. So again, thinking about the colors and how they change. Smoothing out my painting. And so as I'm painting, my style choice is developing and emerging, and I'm going to put it on the top one over that texture I made as well. Always having to refine the work. And then go back in, fix up that texture. I decided to keep it. And not only did I decide to keep it, but I'll add it to the other two layers too for balance once I'm done refining this color blocking shadow technique. Do you need to use every technique I'm showing here? You don't. This is just what developed while I was painting. And remember, we are experimenting with these techniques, and the whole purpose of this is to develop your skills, but also learn to explore and experiment and let things happen. So while I'm waiting for things to dry, I'm doing the cherry. And you can see I'm leaving a white highlight on the cherry, like it's really shiny, like a maraschino cherry is. And again, I'm color blocking on that side, darkening it up. And then I'm deciding to play with some outlines. Again, making that style more bold, more graphic with a stronger outline. This is something I could have done with marker as well, but decided to try to do it with the paint. I didn't want to use any marker on this yet. I just wanted to start the painting for this demo. And please don't use marker yet. We will be doing that tomorrow or in the following days, depending on how this goes for you guys. So, and you can see I'm not bringing the outlines all the way across. I'm leaving some space in the middle so it's not doesn't get totally flattened out. Again, going over my shading, strengthening it up, so layers of paint. And then coming in, adding more texture. This is just lightly dabbing the paint on. And then taking a wet brush and blending it in. You can see I'm being very loose. I'm not trying to control it too much, but working it into the paint to create that balance. And this just kind of evolved through trial and error. I'm not 100% in love with it. I'll probably continue to keep working on it. Maybe I'll try another one. You might have to do 2 or 3 versions before you kind of get something that you are liking. and that's okay. But I would say, just like with the portraits, you realize you have to go through these awkward periods where you're not loving your work and you have to push through and problem solve, knowing that eventually you will get there. And so I probably will come back to this, paint it a little bit more, maybe work marker into it tomorrow or the next day when we do our marker demo to see how it can develop further. But I think it's important that you guys see how things, not only how work can develop, but how it can be a struggle to develop. So hopefully this demo gives you some ideas about how to apply the paint. That's the key takeaway here, but also you can see how style develops through the application of the paint and the choice of colors and the choice of lines and texture. All right.